Humanity is on a perpetual cycle of
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, happy day. My name is Marcy Booth. I'm the events director here at Avasant, and I'm excited to welcome you to our digital forum on leveraging new healthcare technologies and platform strategies for operational success. This session is being held in collaboration with our event partner, Infosys. Navigate your next. If you have any questions during our panel discussion, please just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will be able to get that question in. With that, I'd like to welcome today's moderator, Matt Barlow, our managing partner and healthcare lead here at Avasant. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Marcy. It's great to be here. Let me just start off by kind of covering a few things. The last 3 years has been quite a journey for both healthcare payers and providers, between COVID changing the member and patient behaviors, and the amount of innovation that started to creep into the market is pretty unprecedented. Many companies are working on solving a core data integration problem, which we'll break apart a little bit today, which is critical at understanding how to effectively manage the front, the middle, and the back office services for all payers. Now, this is happening in the healthcare software development industry with some of the leading adjudication engines that are trying to extend the reach of their platforms into some of the most difficult and manually laden processes in healthcare, as well as companies like Salesforce, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, who are coming up with some interesting platform solutions that likely have not reached full maturity. Now, this is also happening in the commercial healthcare plans in the space, where a number of fairly successful healthcare plans have built platforms to compete with software services firms with some levels of success. Optum being maybe an example of one of those, but there's dozens of other payer entities which have had modest levels of success, like Oscar and Highmark and others. And continuing on, there's also companies like Livongo and Hinge and Progeny that have built point solutions that are end-to-end designed for payers for specific disease states that can better manage remote patient and remote member hybrid models. And lastly, the digital service provider market, who typically spans across multiple payers, is able to see the uniqueness of the problems with each and start to build some products that are directly competing with the commercial markets. So there's a lot of activity happening. Companies like Infosys and others have been developing in-house platforms that provide solutions to common client challenges. Helix, which we'll get into a little bit today, is a powerful example of how the convergence of the payer administration and population health management functions can be fully integrated and automated as possible. And Marcy, let's jump to the next slide, if you don't mind. Okay, I think that's not the right slide. Let's go back one slide. Okay. All right. So now let's jump forward again, Marcy. So we're just starting to scratch the surface. All these solutions that we're talking about today are trying to solve common challenges like social determinants of health, disease management, integration of devices and platforms. These are very, very big lifts. And Avasant's developed some unique process-based IP that brings together that value chain, allows us to look at the front office, the middle office, and the back office. Predominantly where we're going to focus the discussion today is sort of in this area in the blue, in the middle, which we sort of define as the middle office. And today we'll talk about different solutions that have emerged in the market and how integrating payer administration is more aligned to the health of the members. Now, claims administration continues to be at the heart of it. There's value-based care. And if you can go to the next slide, Marcy, value-based care is going to be a huge portion of it. Provider networks and pricing is something we'll talk a little bit about. The member services 360 view is also something we'll talk a little bit about. And there's usually a combination of technology solutions and specific operational processes that are largely driven by workflows that are trying to solve these problems. And let's go to the last slide. So just to sort of as a little bit of a teaser and to get us thinking, obviously we're thinking about platforms in all kind of 4 of these areas, whether it's digital ops, whether it's care, whether it's integration and security, whether it's cost savings and consumer management. So this will give you a little bit of some logos we can talk about as we do a little bit of a deeper dive. Now let me introduce my panel. We'll crack a few of these topics open. I'm going to start off with Dr. Steve Gerst, who is a fellow with Avasant and who's always at the forefront of digital health trends, former VP at Columbia and HCA Healthcare, and Badi Guttal, who also lives and breathes this topic every day as the head of health core platforms at Infosys. So let's go ahead and get started. Steve, let's start with you. Can you talk about the big moving forces that you're seeing in this market that are making a difference? And am I correct that platforms will be at the heart of everything, that they're going to be the major driver of that?
You're absolutely right, Matt. As we've seen, especially with a lot of the Avasant work, transformational work lately, so many health systems and payers are now moving to the cloud. There's so many reasons to do that, but if you recall, within hospitals, for example, there have been many disparate systems evolved over individual budgets for individual departments over the years that are siloed information. They need to all move to one data platform. Also, security is a huge issue. We've seen the average cost of ransomware now go to $10 million. There was everybody knows about the Anthem issue, which cost $80 million. But recently there was one in Tallahassee just a couple of weeks ago that shut down the hospital. This is an issue which the cloud offers much better cybersecurity, much better support, IT infrastructure than most individual hospital systems or smaller payers have. The market for that is predicted to be over $1 trillion, 1.7 trillion by the end of this year, and I can see by the end of the decade, you're going to be looking at $2 to $3 trillion spent in that space. AI is the next major issue that we're seeing. That is just coming on like gangbusters. Almost every portion of a hospital or a payer today is being touched by AI, and there's development opportunities everywhere. There's been over $48 billion invested in the last few years just in AI in healthcare. And some other companies have predicted anywhere from 150 billion to $270 billion in annual savings that AI can bring. I can just mention, if you don't mind, a couple of the technologies. Some of the biggest ones we're seeing is in imaging. AI, for example, can read X-rays and CTs and MRIs much faster than the human can, and in many cases, the radiologist is looking simply at what for that single diagnosis. But in many cases, the AI can pick up nodules or heart disease or other disease entities that the human eye may miss. You can use it in cardiovascular event monitoring, in GI, especially for cancerous polyps that may be small that the gastroenterologist might not see. Dermatology, they're comparing millions and millions of images, so you can, even off a smartphone, be able to diagnose melanomas and different cancers. Ophthalmology, retinal scanning is the window into the body. You can see diabetes, you can see all kinds of different entities. Pathology is huge on the cancer side to look at cells. And of course, we have robotics, which is governed by AI. You know, the early applications has been the Da Vinci machines and surgical robotics, but now we're getting robotics in almost every aspect of the hospital, from food delivery and prescription management to we're actually getting into the home with emotional distress companions for both the elderly and senior care and for children. So you can see all of that. We're getting virtual reality that for pain management. We're getting training under augmented reality for physicians and nurses. There's virtual nurses. There's 3D printing of organs. There's ambient and natural language processing that automatically takes in the physician as they speak. I mean, there's a famous cartoon from a couple of years ago where the physician is spending more time at the computer than they are with the patient. and natural language processing and ambient processing is now starting to take that, so it automatically populates the electronic medical record so the physician can spend more time with the patient. So you're seeing that, you're seeing clinical decision support assisted by AI, which will speed activities. And I know we're going to get into remote patient monitoring telemedicine, but there's also digital patches. 3M just came out with a digital patch to monitor vital signs. Biointelligence also has a digital patch, all that feeds into the EMR. There's drug development, which is huge with AI, and precision medicine. So we have all of those things going on just on the clinical side. And then the third major movement that we're seeing is RPA. So repetitive process automation on the claim side, detecting fraud, checking for automated flow sheets, supply chain management, all of these things that a lot of repetitive tasks like automated pre-serve. All of these things are coming together under AI and repetitive process activities that are bringing together the healthcare system to make it much more efficient for both payers and providers. So those are some of the major trends that we're starting to see. And of course, population health, use in population health. And, we want to prevent another COVID if we can, and be able to pick up trends in population health as well as health equity issues. So there's lots of things we could talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack on all. I jotted down at least 3 or 4 things that we'll probably come back to that I didn't think of earlier in these questions. And I think that the sort of the release of this ChatGPT product has actually made people realize what's possible, right? It's the first demonstrable product that truly shows amazing application uses. And I think it's the tip of the iceberg, as we talked about. So we have a long way to go. Vadi, let's switch over to you. You live and breathe this all day long. You're someone who's been in this market for some time. What do you see the challenges that some of the platforms are trying to solve?
Yeah, I think there was a great information in terms of the trends, Steve. And as we look at some of the pardon me, I have allergies since morning today. As we see some of these moving parts and the driving market forces, and I think Matt, you talked about the new digital health tech firms coming in, and so when you talked about the technology and those playing into how the role they are playing in influencing some of the key business processes, right? And where I come from, focusing on the payer segment, and I think there is a significant impact on pretty much most of the processes that go on around the health plan operations and the health plan functioning itself. And I think one of the things that, in my opinion, is dramatically changing, it is from Infosys Helix perspective, it's a point of view that we are working towards, is the payer and provider interaction and integration. I've probably read about this, I've spoken about this since I have come to know healthcare in US, about whole payer and provider collaboration. But it is getting to some definitive meaning in the current situation we are in. There are payers doing vertical integration by acquiring all the PCP clinics and the specialty care clinics. And then there are hospital chains themselves, expanding, looking to acquire some of the capabilities that they did not focus on before, right? While inpatient has been a cost leader for them, but they tend to focus on inpatient more than outpatient. So now the shift is, how can I increase my margin through outpatient services? So as providers are expanding themselves from that, and the payers are looking to vertically integrate, that space is in for in my opinion, rapid disruption. And in Infosys and focusing on as we build out Helix, our point of view going into this would be, due to the competitive forces that are going to play in, and the providers will eventually become a sort of a franchisee model. And there would be an advocacy built specifically around the Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplemental programs, because the membership is going to be routed to the through the providers that who based on my PCP recommendation. So there is a significant amount of influence that the primary care physicians are going to play in. And the whole advocacy model, the franchising model, requires a fundamental building block in terms of the capability from the payer perspective. That is how quickly I can onboard a provider, how quickly I can recruit a provider based on the adequacy ratio that I'm seeing, how fast I can credential a provider. So some of these things are, I think, problem areas in the payer world today, have been in the past for several years, but they are now focusing to solve some of these. And endeavor would be to look at, remove those batch-oriented processes in the middle and make them as real-time as possible, so that it can truly effectively become a franchising model. I don't need to be submitting a huge paperwork, then calling into call center to find out where my application form is. So those are the things that so many health plans are still dealing with in terms of the painful processes. And I think that, in my opinion, Matt, is gonna undergo significant change.
Wow, amazing. Steve, you pay attention a lot to the market. I talked about sort of the four entities. You've got the service integrators working on this. You've got the health plans working on this. You've got the software companies and the platform companies that are working on this. And you've got a lot of digital point solutions that are sort of working on different components of the solutions that we're talking about. Are any of the four real innovation leaders? Are you seeing any major disruption breakthroughs in the last couple of years?
Absolutely. I mean, when we started this, Matt, I think a couple of years ago, started doing this series.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really consider Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft as really leading the charge in healthcare. It was Epic and Cerner and some of the other major players. All of a sudden, this is all coming together, and it's coming together quickly because the major consumer entities that are recognizing the value of the patient, not only at the hospital standpoint, but in the home and as consumers. The data alone in healthcare is supposedly worth 7 to 8 times as much as financial data. And of course, the US healthcare system is now going to $4.3 trillion. It's 20% of the GDP. So these folks are making tremendous investments into the healthcare space and developing partnerships in almost every aspect of healthcare where they can. So they want to get, as you put up in your chart, with the front end, the middleware and back end of the healthcare system. Some of those leaders are getting into the space as best they can, starting with the digital front door. If you can get into the home and you can get to the patient as soon as they want to get into that hospital or into the provider system, you start capturing that data. And when you start capturing that data, you can apply the AI, you can apply the RPA, and you can do an awful lot with it. So, I mean, we've seen some tremendous investment lately. You mentioned right off the bat, ChatGPT, $10 billion was put into this just in November, into OpenAI by Microsoft. Why? Because of the data. I mean, it's a generative AI platform that once you populate that with healthcare data and healthcare lingo, I mean, the sky's the limit on where you can go with this. Just think about all the clinical decision support, being able to analyze and do reports on radiology and all the other things we talked about. This is a tremendous platform. Google's got one named Bard that they're experimenting with too. Originally, they were doing it to beef up. Microsoft was buying this to beef up Bing versus Google, and Google has 7% of all their inquiries are healthcare now. That's 70,000 transactions a second, where people are coming to Google for healthcare information. So you can see where this is going. But then you have Amazon, which has on their cloud has 7 times the revenue of some of these other players, just on the cloud and covering the security issues. And they just bought. A lot of these companies have had different forays into the healthcare space. Google Health, for example, Amazon Health. They've hired people from some of the top doctors from Geisinger and Cerner and everything and from the government to try and direct them, and they're making huge progress. So, for example, we were talking earlier with Amazon buying One Medical. They'll be in 19 major markets in the primary care space. And then what they want to do is use Whole Foods as a distribution network, plus Alexa for drug distribution. They own PillPack. So they're bringing this all together from end to end to try and dominate and control the healthcare system. And I think we're going to see that. You're going to see more and more of this. And AI is going to be the basis of it.
You said Alexa, and it turned on Alexa in my hotel room, so she was talking in the background as you said that.
Well, you'll be able to make appointments off, scheduling appointments right off Alexa.
I got to tell you, every time I hear you talk about the clinical automation processes, it makes the non-clinical automation processes seem so boring now, because there's just so much exciting stuff that can happen in the speed of clinical delivery and that space. It's just amazing. So, Vadi, I was really impressed when I first saw Helix demoed. The ability to manage both the member lifecycle, the administration, and some of the clinical procedures effectively across multiple payers and lines of business. Can you tell me about the heart of the strategy with Helix and specifically what problems you guys are trying to solve with that?
Yeah, no, I think a great question, Matt, in terms of the member focus, or, historically, we have called it Member 360 and member-centric focus, member centricity, consumer centricity. There have been so many terminologies, but really, if you look at the care delivery process itself within the health plan, none of them are orchestrated towards member. They're all orchestrated towards the health plan, like you were showing in the middle office processes. If you look at a simple process, 60 to 70% of the time of a business process is spent within the payer itself, from the patient to the provider in that. So how do we optimize that? And that is really core of the member centricity that we are working towards. Of course, from the technology jargon perspective, we call it event-driven architecture, but really what we are looking to achieve is the moment there is an enrollment, there shouldn't be any lag in having a PCP assigned to that member, so that there is a real time, and the moment the enrollment completes, the member should be able to visit a physician and make an appointment. So that's one of the focus areas that we are looking at. The other one is really, and you touched upon on the clinical aspects, which is the core concept of member twin. Member twin is a digital twin of an actual member out there, wherein we bring in the plan data, the social determinants, and the clinical prior history all together to frame that unique member 360, and which is be able to throw a technology at it, be it NLP like a ChatGPT, or it could be even just a simple Q&A, whether this member will have run into substance abuse disorder in future, as an example. Today, when you enroll a Medicaid member, until you see some of those claims and realize that there could be member could benefit from another program from the state, which is focusing on substance abuse, you don't submit the enrollment. And that is a substantial lag in time from the beneficiary getting the benefits he is supposed to be getting through a variety of the government-sponsored programs. So how do we optimize that, and how can we make these dollars that are getting spent by the state actually reach the member in a much faster way? So the concepts like the member twin, which is a healthcare replica for digital twin, can expedite some of those processes, and that's, I think, one of the things that we are working in Helix effectively at.
Yeah, member engagement's definitely an area that has a lot of potential. The better members engaged, informed to take action on their health dramatically reduces the chances of catastrophic events happening. Is a big part of your platform strategy to improve the member experience and to empower the members with their own data? Is that sort of a core part of this?
That's exactly right, Matt. I think what we are looking at, what are those big border blocks that are preventing member access all the benefits that they should be getting from the payer, and help them navigate that or orchestrate that seamlessly within the payer environment. Let's say a provider submits a prior auth. Of course, there are regulations that govern it, and but why should that process take 2 days to 4 days today to get a response back on a prior auth? And that should be, again, near real time or real time. So that's one process. And I talked about the PCP assignment, and then there are ID cards that go out, and again, that's taking significant amount of time. So there are these processes that make the member experience so low. And I was reading this somewhere, which was very interesting anecdotally to refer here. The satisfaction level with the respective payers is lower than the Congress. Now you can imagine the impression the members have about their health plans. So, and a lot of that is because how traditionally the core payer processes have been designed and developed, and they are not member centric. So there is that push needs to come in. Of course, the technology is the driver now that can achieve some of that in a meaningful way.
Right, great, that's amazing. So how critical in some of this is having EMR data versus having ICD coding data? Is having that EMR data integrated an important part of this, or not an important part?
Oh no, absolutely, it is important, and I think the processes that we are looking at right now in terms of that takes time is the clinical data coming into the health plan itself. There are only few occasions that payers purchase these medical charts, and one, it could be in terms of the risk adjustment, or it could be in HIDIS season where you are trying to fulfill some of the processes that are required for the star rating. So unless you have a drive of that nature, payers are not really proactive in getting the medical chart. So that is changing, of course, as we speak. I'm aware quite a few payers have tried to integrate with Epic and Cerner themselves. But having said, it's also not very easy because you are bound by certain regulations, but also the health systems who govern these processes and make the clinical data available to the payer. So there is some for lack of a better word, red tape there. But I think if we take that out, technology exists today where I could go to an RCM system, pull the charge capture and take it and submit a claim real time and adjudicate the claim and give that real retail-like experience to the member. Is technology there? Yes. Is it being availed? No.
Is core adjudication a part of the Helix platform strategy? Are you guys looking to adjudicate claims as one of the functions?
We are coming, yeah, no, that's a good point, man. And we are coming in outside in. We are looking at the provider experience, the member experience, and then coming into adjudication.
Like a top-down solution, not
That's
a
correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Couple other things. Are you guys tackling provider networks, credentialing, anything else like that? Or do you see anyone in the market, Steve, that's really going after that space?
I've seen it a little bit. The whole provider credentialing space has been going for quite a while, trying to put it together. Mostly, I think some of the big HMOs, big networks have got it down, and they're applying AI to that because there's so many changes to providers and their offices and their patients. A lot of Medicare Advantage tends to be driving this quite a bit. Also the provider directories have moved to online, so they can be kept up to date almost instantaneously, a lot better and a lot faster. And this is important because so many providers are members of multiple networks. Their own offices can't keep up.
Contracts are so different from hospital to hospital too. It makes a big difference.
Right. And then you're getting value-based contracts on top of that, which are now penetrating the market. So all of this needs to be managed on a consistent IT infrastructure.
Okay. So let's shift topics to maybe one of the slightly sexier topics that you were talking about, Steve. Let's shift into the clinical space. So what are some of the use cases for clinical across the board, or we could just talk core population health management? What do you guys think? You mentioned a couple, Steve, early, and maybe we can do a double click on any of those if you think it's appropriate.
Yeah, basically the three major areas is digitization, patient engagement, and diagnostics. So those are the three areas that we want to focus on. Moving everything digital is, of course, what we're talking about in the cloud. And that's critically important because, one of the things that we've seen so much consolidation in the industry amongst hospital systems buying other hospital systems. One of the recent ones, I remember when Aurora was merging with a large system in Illinois. And then they merged with Atrium, and they were all on different systems, but they had to move consistently to the Epic system. And there's been a lot of transition in doing that, but you can imagine how many different information systems each one of these departments has had. When you have a hospital system going from 20 hospitals to 40 to 100 hospitals, and how many providers, it's very important. Also, a lot of these provider systems, the independent physicians are on different systems. You need to have interoperability. You need to have FHIR. You need to have connectivity. I have in my own market right here, I just experienced it at my hospital down the street. They have an ACO with 300 physicians. The hospital's on one system, the ACO physicians are on another, and the independent radiology centers in the area are all on different systems. Even in today's day, you'd think they'd all be combined, but they're not. Yeah. You need that interoperable platform to make it all work. We're looking at AI.
Connect all those pieces together somehow.
Right. And once you have that together, as Vijay was talking about, then AI can definitely assist physicians in making decisions. And once you have that data and you have the database where the system can look at the radiology findings, the primary care findings, the lab findings, put it all together, then they can assist in clinical decision support and decision making. You can get earlier diagnoses. You can get predictive outcomes of disease. You can work on population health. One of the interesting stories I read in preparing for this was the use of AI by the Singapore government. They went out and got 5,000 patients who had diabetes, and they can constantly track them and constantly nudge them by using remote patient monitoring to monitor their glucose. and find out where they are. So you're seeing all this. You want to be able to get feedback on treatment, reduce diagnostic and therapeutic errors, reduce medical variability, and have AI track the systems, and then look retrospectively at what happened so you can change and learn. And machine learning is going to do that for you as well. You know, so that's what we're going to start to see, a lot more AI machine learning in this. And then when you put all that together, as Vijay was talking about, your coding and billing systems. You bring that all together too, to reduce errors, reduce fraud, bring it together ultimately with pharmaceuticals. And then you start to get that 360 picture that you were talking about earlier, Matt, of the patient. Then we're going to have a much better healthcare system. But it's all going to be driven by the IT side.
Right. So, Vadi, tell me, AI, machine learning, you think about it a lot?
Yeah, we do. And in fact, the technology in terms of the whole machine augmenting the human expertise in making the business processes, right? In those, what we call as being true AI first, is really when you have machine augmenting that human expertise in making those micro business decisions. It could be resolving an appeal, it could be resolving a pending claim, it could be any of those small things that happen in a peer organization. If I can use machine learning to automate some of those process steps, is where the peers can start differentiating themselves vis-a-vis their peer organizations. And that is a competitive advantage that they can build on over a period of time. Because as these machine learning models refine themselves, and I think Stephen was talking about ChatGPT earlier, of course, OpenAI has been working on it for 5-6 years now, right? In fact, could be even longer. But look at the maturity it has reached now through the DaVinci 3, which is really the learnability of these models reaches in a scale that can render a huge competitive advantage for these organizations. So that first mover advantage, of course, there is, but really sustaining it is very critical. And that is where, again, the platform-centric approach, because if you're an organization, you're trying to do this on your own, as you are looking at huge capital investments and very highly trained data scientists and technologists being involved. But if you were to shift back to the platform-centric approach, and there is a platform giving you that capability out of the box, then you focus on where you want to improve the member experience or the provider experience. So you are focusing on what matters to you and your members, than trying to figure out whether do I have the harmonized data in my enterprise data warehouse? Do I have all the data quality that is set up to the standards that I can serve better, right? And we were talking about, I think Stephen was touching upon the interoperability. And in my opinion, I think all the peer organization have done today is to minimally comply with what was required by the law. Have we really, achieved what the true premise behind the interoperability? Probably not. And there is quite a bit of work that need to be done to really achieve that. And that is going to really where machine learning is going to be a lot more effective than what it is today.
Yeah.
Right. If I could add to that, Matt, a couple of things Vijay said I'd like to expound on. One of which is what AI can do by way of, it's not necessarily the technology itself, okay, but it's how you use it. It's changing clinical workflows and operational processes that Vijay was talking about. Adding value in one of two ways. It either adds value by automating the way the work is done, or augmenting the way the work is done. And I think that's what we're working on. And he also mentioned competitive edge. Reaching out to the consumer, recognizing that it costs 7 times more to acquire a new patient than to retain one. You want to be able to do that.
Yep.
And there were several years ago, I guess it was 5 or 10 years ago, I was working with a large home, one of the largest home security providers, and developing remote patient monitoring and telemedicine programs. And I was referred down to one of the largest home builders in the country. And these guys had come from Disney as to try, how do we automate the house? And they had one room up there with a Pendleton cycle and an alive core, cardiac monitor, but nothing was connected. And I said, what you guys need to do is connect this to the hospital, to the local hospital, get it on the system so that you have real-time connectivity and you're reaching out. And some of the most interesting things that I've seen lately is not only is companies that have temperature monitors, for example, inside the home, that also monitor people's activities, their resting heartbeat. Now with sonar, they're monitoring respirations. So for people with asthma, COPD, people who fall down, help by falling. Well, now you're going to be able to be connected immediately. And with an aging population, this is really where it's going. So reaching out to the consumer, connecting that to the provider system, connecting that to the payer is critically important. And I think that's where we're going to go.
Great. So you sort of touched around remote patient monitoring there, and that obviously got moved to the forefront during COVID, right? It was the big talk during COVID. Does remote patient monitoring have any place in the payer space as digital health becomes more commonplace? And Vadi, I'll ask that one for you first, and then we'll come back. And Steve, I want to get your reaction on that.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think there is, Matt, quick responses. There is very good relevance from the payer perspective. In fact, in Helix, we are right now doing some exploratory pilots where using remote patient monitoring as a technique to engage with the chronic patients. However, I think the adoption is dependent on the prescription of a provider today. And I know Medicare allows to some degree today, and you can charge back on the device as well as the time you spend on the remote monitoring itself. There is also perspective to look at it from the DME perspective, but that dust has to settle down, and I don't believe it is. There is a consistency in the practice of prescribing, adopting, and delivering care through, the remote patient monitoring as such. But when that's done, I think it's a huge vehicle to reduce the medical costs for your multiple chronic condition patients or members, both from the dual eligible Medicare and where applicable even Medicaid, right? So that's where I think it has a huge role, because and look at it, if you need to measure temperature for a patient 10 times a day, the amount of time that a nurse practitioner need to go and measure it, and the cost you incur in doing it versus streaming it out of using a wearable, it's a if not 10x, several multiples of savings that you could achieve just in that process. So that's all going to yield focus on how can I optimize the medical costs and deliver value. So certainly remote patient monitoring has a huge opportunity in the next few years, Matt, in terms of the adoption, bringing in the consistency in the how it is deployed and used, and then value it will deliver to the eligible population.
Great. Steve, I'm going to come back to remote patient monitoring for you. Do you think it's going to find its way into the health plan space?
Absolutely, it's integral to it. I mean, because as Vijay was saying, from a payer's perspective, the cost of healthcare is primarily chronic care management. Especially when you get into the Medicare space, Medicare Advantage, 4 out of 5 people have at least one chronic condition. Now, that could be hypertension, that could be diabetes, that could be hypercholesterolemia, Alzheimer's, all kinds of different conditions that have to be monitored. And that's where the cost is, because it's repeated hospitalizations, You've got the pharmaceuticals that you have to that constantly spend money on to manage these cases. And so a combination of telemedicine and remote patient monitoring is where it's going. That's really what you saw with the purchase of Livongo by Teladoc. And, you know, we were talking earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the big tech companies buys a telemedicine company, you know, and integrates that with remote patient monitoring so that they're in the home all the time, 24/7, and that they're monitoring people. And not only through, I mean, the current state of remote patient monitoring, you know, they send out devices and it first goes through your phone and then into the cloud. Okay, but they're specific devices for specific conditions. What I think we're going to get, what I'm seeing now, is ambient monitoring. Okay, background monitoring of people all the time, and that data is going to be fed also into the payer, because the payer ultimately wants to keep the cost down by keeping people healthy and keeping them out of the hospital, right? So as Vijay was saying, that's where I think the focus is going to be going forward.
I'm going to shift topics to some audience questions that are sort of, let's call it, say, orbiting that cost topic. So first question from the audience: the goal of a consolidated AI-centric health ecosystem for the patient is exciting. What about the cost? How do we dramatically reduce the cost of healthcare at the same time as investing in all of this technology? Vadi, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. I think there are two parts to the cost, right? When we talk about, one is the admin cost and the other is the actual medical costs.
Yep.
You know, you can reduce, you know, the admin cost substantially by, you know, collapsing those red tape walls that are there within the payer organization in terms of the process efficiencies. And that's where, you know, you use the machine learning and automate things that doesn't need human touch, and improve the experience, also more importantly, reduce the cost in the process. Now, that's the not so sexy part, right? Matt, you were talking about it. So the sexy part is in the medical costs. So which is, you know, there.
I think the ROI is there too. I think that's where your savings.
That's correct. And of course, you know, medical costs is, there is a huge amount of money being spent in looking at using machine learning to do the disease prognosis, earlier detection, identifying the disease conditions, doing the recommendations. So that it needs to come to an industrial grade, in my opinion, for it to be really adopted and deliver value. We have, you know, some more miles to cover there. But I think on the admin processes is a no-brainer in my mind.
Yeah, I'm gonna move on to some questions for you, Steve. Just because in the interest of time, we got probably maybe 5 more minutes here. Is there any significant work being done in building a platform that can work well with community-based organizations to address the social determinants of health and move data back and forth? Are you seeing that? And then Vadi, maybe same from you.
Yeah, I think again, I'll take this back to interoperability. You know, that's sort of the key, is to be able to tie the data from the community, which maybe there's at one point there are over 1,000 different EMR systems out there being used by providers, and trying to tie those all together through APIs, so you have one consistent community-based database that you can work from. That's going to be very helpful, especially, you know, what we said, COVID. You know, aside from all of the horrible things that happened there, really jump-started the whole digital movement to go rapidly. We talked about telemedicine. Telemedicine visits went up thousands of times in the first few weeks, and they're holding. You know, people are used to it now. They expect it. So you want to bring that all together. Well, one of the things I wanted to add on Vijay's point from the last question was the savings that you can produce by pulling this all together. And one set of figures I saw was about 270 billion a year 114 billion comes from service operations, making that better, as Vijay was saying. Then you've got marketing and sales, risk management, supply chain management. Obviously, we have specific drug development that's specific to keep the cost down with precision medicine, fraud detection, finance, HR. There's ways to use queuing theory and to optimize staffing within the hospital or within your provider practice. So all of those affect the community in that you want to tie that together. I'll tell you, where I am in Florida, there's that joke that, you come down here and all you hear about is healthcare, arthritis, and golf. And everybody's concerned about their health, and everybody talks about it constantly. So, bringing the community together around platforms that talk to each other and engage the patient is really the key to the whole thing.
All right, well, one more question, audience question, last one. And I don't think I'm going to make the lightning round. We'll see. Probably not. So based on compute workload, latency, et cetera, where's the best location of compute for AI process activities related to things like radiology, cardiology, dermatology expected to live? In other words, do those AI workloads need to live at the edge, or are they being carried back to centralized data centers? That one, Vadi, I'm going to throw that one to you. I think that Steve may not want that question unless you want it, Steve. You can come back to it.
Well, I do have some answers to that, but
Right.
I'll defer to Vijay first.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the ability for the edge devices to take on that kind of a workload is still evolving, right? So right now, that's all centralized in a cloud, and data gets streamed to the cloud, and even the remote patient monitoring, the use cases that we were talking about earlier, right now, I think the edge devices are efficient in capturing the data and streaming over to the centralized cloud where the processing happens. But as the ability of these edge devices to process improves, I think some of those could be done on the edge devices, and that's where I think is going to render huge advantages specific to the devices that are used in the hospital systems and the health systems. But right now, I think it's the centralized cloud is where it's getting done today.
Steve, what do you got?
I'd like to add to that. In a lot of the research I was doing for this, they suggested that, so many of the AI solutions are can be specific to that hospital or specific to being to certain areas of specialty and can be disrupted. And one of the things you want to do is start off with smaller pilots, gain adoption by the physicians and the providers, look for outcomes. A lot of these AI, some of them, they're just new. They're not perfect. And a lot of the AI that's being developed are being developed by hospitals themselves through their own venture companies, through their own data scientists that are designing technologies that can then be used by other hospitals. And so you can putting that together and looking for gaining adoption within the hospital system, make sure it works before taking it out to the market is also another key factor.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. So I think we've got just a couple more minutes left. I'm going to close with some remarks here. So we live in a pretty interesting time right now. I would sort of liken where we are right now to the very early stages of the internet revolution, where standards are being set, capabilities are being created, winners and losers are being formed. The platforms that create true integration and are furthest ahead in that curve will have the opportunity to completely change how care is delivered. I'd like to thank my panel today. I think this is amazing and engrossing conversation. I always learn a lot whenever I come into these meetings, and I want to thank both Vadi and Dr. Gerst for attending today, as well as the audience members. Great to see everyone.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll call it an end from there, Marcy, unless you wanted to jump in and say anything else.
Yes, thank you guys so much. That was a really, really great panel discussion. I feel like there were a lot of great insights that you were able to share with everyone. So I also just want to do a very quick thank you to our panelists, of course, for you for attending today, and Infosys for being our event partner. If you have any questions at all, please definitely reach out to us so that we can help you with these solutions. The information's here on the screen, but in the meantime, please have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Avasant event. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Marcy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Thanks, Matt. Best to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bailey. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Marcy.